This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome everybody to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. It's going to be a very special one. Tonight, the Lions take the field. Primetime, the nation will see the Detroit Lions try to grind it out against the Packers. Look, everyone knows maybe the quality of football might not be exactly what everybody thinks it should be because of the short rest, but it's going to be a tough game, a grind it out kind of game. Could be a very sloppy game, but hopefully the Lions will end up on the winning side and end up 3-1. We're going to talk all about it, but we're going to start talking about, on this week's episode, obviously the news that was made on Wednesday afternoon regarding Mel Tucker. But before we get into the chaos of Michigan State and maybe looking advanced into the future, looking at a crystal ball regarding who they could get, because the buzz of the sports world is something that now potentially has also touched Detroit Sports Podcast. Craziness in that when I was in Kansas City, the wife, who's not bougie, but she wants to go to nice places. So she's like, we're going here to Prime Social. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, oh, $25 drinks. This is going to be terrible. But it was great. Got to meet the bartender who invited me to a tailgate. And it was great. One of the best old fashions I ever got. I got the secret recipe in regards to new bitters that I could try, orange bitters and shit like that to make old fashions at the house. I was like, this is legit. All of a sudden, come to find out, potentially my ass was in the same bar seat as the baddest pop star on the planet. Taylor Swift rented out the whole joint, whereas I can't do that. She might have been sitting in the exact same bar stool as the Doc, where she rolls in as like, look, people, which is really a boss move to hear this story. She's like, I'm going to pay all your tabs, just step out. And they're like, okay. And she rented out the whole joint. It's a nice place. So to hear that, I would talk to the bartender, and I'm like, man, you're a bartender to the superstar. She's like, it's a crazy story that I was working the night that the Chiefs win and Taylor Swift comes into town and is the talk of the NFL world. It's crazy. We're not going to touch too much on it because it's corny. But my God, this is like what quarterbacks do. They roll up with superstars, a tight end. Look where that position's going because they're balling out with pop stars.
Dude, so what you're saying is your butt sweat
yes.
and Taylor Swift's butt sweat
could have met.
Might have marinated on the same seat.
Exactly.
There we go.
Exactly. I told you we were spreading like a virus. Everything is going on. It's crazy. I was like, wait a minute, my wife. So the way I found out is I was watching sports at like 10:30 and I'm like half asleep. And my wife talks to me. She's like, oh my God, Taylor Swift went to social. And I'm, when you wake up and you're just trying to talk, but you're making no sense because you have no idea what she's talking about. I'm like, who went to social? What are you talking about? She's like, they went to social. I'm like, what social? Are we going? And she's like, Taylor Swift went to social. And I still didn't understand what that meant. She's like, I'm texting with the bartender now. She worked the event. I'm like, what? And then finally, after like 5 minutes and waking up from the deep sleep I was in, she's like, yeah, the bartender that we were served by in our tour of Kansas City, they shut down the bar. They told everybody about it. It's a nice little quaint area. It's like a Royal Oak kind of thing. It's upstairs. You kind of got to go upstairs to get into it. It's real quaint, but it was amazing. It was great views of the downtown, and that's why I'm so thankful. I did take my wife on the trip because I got to see nice parts. I just would have slummed it, and just hung out in the cheap parts. And we literally stayed 2 blocks from where the Lions were staying. So I got lucky in that I picked the hotel. But it was crazy in that, hey, man, so that's how it goes, man. The NFL world is a buzz. Women now are all up in this. And look at the NFL. They just luck into more publicity. And did you see the crazy ass numbers? Like number one women.
The ratings and the demographics that were exposed because of Taylor Swift were absolutely nuts. Like young girls that don't ever watch football are now paying attention because of Taylor Swift. It's unreal. Like the NFL does. It just seems to kind of luck up and fall into it all the time.
Yeah, and the crazy part about it is all the ladies that are like, oh, look at that. Taylor Swift put this young tight end on the map. And all the guys are like, this is a all-pro tight end. This is not what he's about. But he did talk about it. I didn't get into it fully. About 32 minutes into this week's podcast, he starts to talk about it, and you can get all the info you want, all the scoop from Travis Kelce right from his mouth, which is great, dude. I love these brother podcasts with the St. Brown and the Kelces. It's great. They're both equally amazing. And but memo to Travis, man, you don't got to eat the microphone. He's like his brother Jason's got it perfect. Travis is all up in it, like, whoa. He's like this. This is how it sounds in it. Jason sounds normal, and Travis, he's like standing like this into the microphone, and his lips are like basically touching it, and it's blaring into the YouTube video. And you're like, oh my God, someone needs to tell him, look, man, the Shure microphone is beautiful. You can back away an inch without eating the microphone, but it's still a great podcast, booming business, and they're very funny. They're very natural, and that's what really broadcasting and podcasting is about, is getting some stories, hearing about it. After we're done, I'm going to go and definitely listen to it a little bit and see what the hell that was all about. But to hear that, I was like, what the hell? Because, I'm way low key. Like when I all I cared about when I booked the hotel was, please God, don't let me have booked it in the ghetto. I realized it was upper level based on the price, but I didn't want to just be in a spot where I was going to be like, there's some rough spots in Kansas City. And that hotel actually is like maybe 4 miles from some rough spots. I was like, oh, please, God, let me not have booked it in a real dangerous spot. But then I went down there and we're like, oh, my God, there's high-end parks, all the restaurants, all the stuff. And then to see like 2 blocks away, I was like, oh, the lines are staying here for sure. You could tell the International and the hotel right next to it were real high-end. And I was like, oh, this is nice. And the hotel was great. Seeing all the fans and to walk downtown Kansas City was really cool, to see the fans and to hang out and have a good time. But to think that you're in a spot that a celebrity wants to close down is crazy, because it's the NFL and that's where they want to hang out, which is downtown Kansas City, which really from the stadium is 10 minutes. So Kansas City is just real nice in regards to all of that. I recommend everybody going to the downtown area if you have the means to doing it. But you make sure you know where you're going, because there's some parts. And I did test it, because of course after the game, because you know what happened? The road back to the main the lane back to the main highway was closed. So I'm like, shit. So I enter into the thing, and this is like 1:40 in the morning, and I'm like, oh fuck, it's 5 miles, but it's through the city. And I'm like, well, it's lit. Let's try it. So I went the back way back to the hotel, and I'm like, this is fucking scary. Let me fucking hit the road here at 50, even at 35. I don't care. I'm trying to drive fast. And you're like, you start learning the roads. They're like, don't go on this road at night. And you find yourself at 2 a.m. crossing that road. You're like, oh, fuck. I don't want to be doing this, but it's well lit. Thank God. It's well lit in Kansas City. But I went the back way from the stadium to the hotel, which all took an extra maybe 5 minutes. But man, the NFL is bumping. You know what's not bumping? Mel Tucker officially fired on Wednesday. And thankfully, I'm not going to spend too much time on this nonsense, because all it's going to do is raise my blood pressure, because of the fact that Michigan State's getting their tail kicked in the last 2 weeks. Homecoming, they just look terrible. No quarterback. What kind of job as a recruiter did you do when you put this roster together? And there's a combination of lack of talent, lack of offensive line prowess, and obviously look, once the blessing for these guys, which is what they should do, and I hope they do, once a coach gets fired, it officially opens the transfer portal for 30 days. Anybody can hop into it. I hope they all do, because there's maybe 5 to 7 players on the entire roster that a college team in a Power 5 conference would even want. It is bad. It is horrible. Now, what sucks, what raises my blood pressure, not Mel Tucker, not the fact that he's a horn dog, not the fact that his taste and choices is poor. And now the extended consequence is you're starting to see 3, 4, and 5-star athletes going, I ain't going there. And they're like nicely saying on their Twitter pages, after careful consideration, we've decided to open our recruitment again. Deuces. I'd like to thank Michigan State for their efforts and the accommodations and everything that they've done, but we're going to have to just open my recruitment. It is a disaster, and it's going to be a disaster that's felt. Now, it basically sucks. Last year was a wash, this year's a wash, and next year is a wash because no man is at the level of Deion where he's going to bring 90 guys in. You have to hit a grand slam like Kenneth Walker, and Michigan State's not going to find goal twice. So it's a disaster. It's at a all-time bad level. Morale's bad. Basically, I watched 4 minutes of the homecoming game. Usually I go there every year. Homecoming is a fun time. I had no desire, nothing at all to want to watch Michigan State football. And basically, it's on to college basketball, baby. That's where we're at. The football program is in complete shambles. And luckily now, the case against Mel Tucker looks to be pretty cut and dry. And all the legalese is going to be really slanted in Michigan State's favor just based on the language that's being used in terms of lies and all that kind of stuff. So Mel Tucker officially whacked, which is good for the Spartan program. Now this is hour one of Michigan State trying to get back in terms of their long road back, because this is bad. This is probably all-time bad, right?
Yeah, so I think it is, right? Now, on the surface, it is horrible for Michigan State. But I think what Mel Tucker has done, it's kind of allowed you a little bit of an out, right? That contract was so burdensome. And as long as Michigan State does everything appropriately, and they've dotted all their I's and they've crossed all their T's, this should go through and they should be able to save almost $80 million, which you can then turn around and act like a big boy school and put all of it or a portion of it towards your next head coach, who's going to come in and help you get those 4- and 5-star athletes and really turn this program around. Look, Mel Tucker was brought in here, and it really does. I think I said this last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't remember last time we talked about this, but it feels like he was a snake oil salesman. It feels like he came in and made a couple of promises, ended up winning 11 games off of the back of Kenneth Walker, and really started to rest on his laurels. Doesn't really seem like he did a great job recruiting. Obviously, the coaching hasn't been fantastic. It has been one of those things where it really feels like he was a guy who was getting high on his own fiefdom and just doing whatever he wanted, was almost going rogue. So for Michigan State to one, have to go through this, yeah, it sucks. But on the flip side, this is a way for you to get out of this. This is a way for Michigan State to kind of, I don't want to say learn a lesson, but take this as a learning experience and be able to move forward. I feel like Michigan State was very quick to pony up a lot of money, and a lot of donors were very quick to come to the table and say, here, we'll give you money. Take our money. We want this. After that 11-2 season, it's one of those things where you sometimes just kind of have to wait a little bit, right? Like, make sure this is the right guy before you go ahead and do something like that. So I think in the end, this is going to work out really, really well for Michigan State, and it's going to help put you in a spot where you're going to be able to capitalize. I don't know if you'll be able to capitalize next year, but I think year 2, going into year 3, Michigan State should be in a much stronger place and hopefully a much more stable place, because it really does feel like since D'Antonio, it has been quite unstable. And really those final, 2 or 3 years under D'Antonio really felt a little unstable. So it hasn't really felt like it's been a stable program for a little bit now. So again, I think this sucks for now, but in the end, in the long run, this is going to be incredibly beneficial for Michigan State. Again, as long as they dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's, did all of their due diligence, and this doesn't blow back up on them. It doesn't blow back in their face, because this is going to go to court. Mel Tucker is going to fight this. This is going to be nasty. It's going to be ugly. If you're a Michigan State fan, you got to get ready for those slings and those arrows, because they're coming your way. But I think in the long run, it's the best thing for Michigan State.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate, because as a supporter, you care about athletics, you care about your university being looked at. So I look, and that's why I say, and some of it's joking, some of it's like, obviously, you want a quick fix and you want wins. If they contact the likes of an Urban Meyer, which they won't, but if they contact somebody with a sketchy past, there's so many coaches that are doing things because if it was crazy. I don't think it'll be allowed now. I think on episode 3 of Swamp Kings, dude, that shit was crazy. They were punching each other in practice if they weren't making the play. And Urban Meyer on film dictates that, he ran it like a military kind of camp, and that's what got him the title. And you realize there's rewards for that, but it's not sustainable. And in 2016, it's maybe a little bit more doable than it is in 2023. Too many videos, too many influencers that don't want that, because it's a great watch. People say it does kind of come out as pro or urban in that some of the negativity is not really highlighted. So I agree, but I will say this. If Michigan State can get somebody that's a disciplinarian that can gain respect, and in the end, if you can just recruit talent, it's something that is super important, because it just seems like since the D'Antonio era, you've had a couple good players, but not collectively in terms of classes upon classes upon classes. And that's what you need. And unfortunately, the consistency is not going to be there in this go round. So it's going to be tough for Michigan State, but right now the first step and the first domino has fallen, and the rest will be, hopefully, we start hearing some names that are potentially in line that will be positive. Some of the names you're hearing are kind of like up-and-coming guys, which is great. I'm more of like, let's just fucking hit a grand slam, but I feel like we're going to hit it.
I feel like
we
Michigan
hit double.
State at this point.
Hit a double.
Michigan State at this point has to just go out and get the guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think up-and-coming is what a program like Michigan State should be looking at. You're a big boy school. Conduct yourself as a big boy school. When you look at the Big Ten really consists of Ohio State, Michigan, and then it's a collective of teams that are right behind them that really back up and kind of make up the meat and potatoes of the league. Michigan State's one of them. Wisconsin's one of them. Iowa's one of them. Those are big schools, and they have the ability to do more and be bigger. But for whatever reason, whether it's they get in their own way or it's just things with the universities, those schools don't ever really ascend to those levels that Ohio State or Michigan do. I feel like if Michigan State can get that next coach, whomever it is, right? And again, it's not an up-and-coming guy. It's got to be a guy who can step in and really transform this university from day one, because you're going through hell right now. The transfer portal window is now open for the next 30 days. You are going to probably lose a bunch of your roster. So you're coming in and you're already working from a negative. So you've got to be able to step in, and you really have to be able to take this over day one and really be able to recruit your ass off, get kids in there who want to be there, and start to build. And you kind of touched on it. The way you get successful in college football is really stacking those recruiting classes. It's not hitting a home run one year, because you've seen what that does. You had a home run with Kenneth Walker, and then he was gone, and then the program took steps back, and now we're here. You have to be able to stack these recruiting classes, and you've got to be able to be deep with talent. And you got to find a guy who's willing and able to do that and is invested in that challenge. Because I believe the entire conference could be Ohio State, Michigan State. Michigan State is a big boy. They just tend to conduct themselves like they're a high schooler, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it is, and you've turned off the fan base, so it's just incumbent upon leadership to really work to. And what's great is, look at this, as we're talking, you get, which was crazy because this week has been the week on social media of everybody sharing their letters. I saw Colin Kaepernick's letter to the Jets, which sounded kind of interesting, but also kind of like normal. It's like, I'll help you, I'll run your scout team, and I think I'll be an asset, which is kind of normal. And then now, as we're talking, the official termination letter that was sent to Mel Tucker. Let's just briefly read it real fast here. It's like, I write, Dear Mr. Tucker, regarding termination of employment, I write on behalf of the university to terminate the amended employment agreement dated November 24th, pursuant to Section 3B1 of the agreement. The university provided you with written notice of the university's intent to terminate the agreement. The university now officially terminates the agreement for cause. Simply put, the response does not provide any information that refutes or undermines the multiple grounds for termination for cause set forth in the notice. And there's a lot more to it. So it's crazy, man. It's crazy. This stuff is like just out there. I'm going to tag you in it right now. This is crazy to see the official letters that come out when people get fired at that level. But for Michigan State, it's time to turn the page, and we will too, because it's just sludge and grime and legalese and you're just finding ways to upset the people that care about your program the most. But to turn the page, wow, the Lions were facing some level of scrutiny, and boy, did they respond. And I think the perfect opponent came to town with the Falcons, with a young quarterback that was inexperienced. And cuz the old timers will love this, those that listen, the Silver Rush was back, baby. Everyone was like, whoa, Aleem McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, the defense balled out, 7 sacks, and they punched the Falcons in the mouth. Now, I know I'm excited. I'm definitely excited about the win, but I look at it like right in the middle. I'm excited they did what they had to do against a lesser opponent, meaning that just prior to the game, I was talking to another reporter, and I say in 50-50 games, you tend to kind of favor the team that has a better quarterback, and it shook out that way that the Lions were hungry, and Jared Goff is a lot better than Desmond Ridder is, and they were able to handle business and really shut down the Falcons' rushing attack, which was really crazy to see that the Gibbs-Robinson matchup just kind of ended up being a dud, and it ended up being a defensive game where it impressed me to see it live, to see the hunger, and the Lions played with desperation. But it doesn't translate moving forward other than if you can build on it, because the Falcons still are developing. It was their first game on the road, and they got a quarterback that for the first time looked like he was totally lost. And credit to the Lions for being able to take him out of their comfort zone and completely disrupt everything that the Falcons were able to do. A lot of things, though, that were concerning regarding penalties and the offense not doing what you got to do. But all in all, to start the potentially start the year 3-1, now that you're sitting on the record of 2-1 after beating the Falcons, I think is great. This was the performance I think they needed. It starts to identify what violent swagger looks like, running to the football, being so aggressive. I think that there was a lot to be satisfied with in regards to the Lions. We'll talk about the offense and them being stalled in first gear, not doing exactly what we think they need to be doing. Because what's your reaction to the win? I thought the defense was the story, and boy, did Aaron Glenn shut some critics up with that performance and game plan.
Yeah, and I'm one of those critics he shut up. The defense definitely stepped up, definitely carried their own water. The defense looked so good. Like the defensive line just applying pressure to the quarterback, and then having guys in the secondary or the linebacking core step up and corral and punch the running backs in the face was incredibly impressive. Brian Branch, I know he didn't win the NFC Defensive Rookie of the week, but man, that guy balled out of his mind, played unreal football. Aiden Hutchinson, it was great to see him come alive. It was great to see him kind of shake off those first 2 games and really be incredibly productive in a football game and really help kind of transform it and turn it around. I mean, he sealed the deal with that final forced fumble and fumble recovery. It's not very often you see a guy go and put a hit on a quarterback, force the fumble, and then recover the fumble. So that was really, really impressive. I thought the defense played exceptionally well. The one thing I will critique about the defense, I know Cam Sutton was brought here to really help shore up that secondary. In the last couple games, Cam Sutton has had me scratching my head because he will take crazy pass interference plays. And look, not all pass interferences are bad. But there are times where I'm just like, what are you doing, Cam? You are supposed to be the guy. And I'm not sure if you're getting beat or if you're just out of position or you're just getting a little bit handsy. But what are you doing? Because those penalties are going to eventually come back and bite you in the butt. I think this team played incredibly well. I thought they did a really nice job. I am concerned with some of the folly that happens with the secondary, but blown away by Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, Brian Branch stood on his head, Jack Campbell, Barnes. It just the defense as a whole played incredibly well, and the offense absolutely needed this. And you're right. Critics are now shut up with Aaron Glenn. Shut me up. He did a great job. Did a fantastic job. So I'm interested to see if this team is able to take that next step forward, really kind of level this up a little bit and see what they do on a short week when they go to Green Bay. As good as the defense looked, how concerned are you with the offense? Because I feel like the defense really helped win that game. The offense stayed steady. They kind of stuck to their game plan, and they just kind of kept chipping away at it. And it felt like it was a game that really could have been put away in the first half, but this game didn't really get sealed until, like I said, that forced fumble recovery by Aiden Hutchinson late in the game. What's your impression with the offense, and why does it seem like it's kind of stuck in second gear?
Yeah, well, here's the basic philosophy. When you don't have a reliable deep threat, then the opponent can lock in and really kind of clog the middle of the field. They can do a lot of things. But guess what they did to try and expose that? They ran Sam Laporta deep, which was beautiful. They ran Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit more than intermediate routes, Khalif Raymond. So that is good in regards to opening up. But here's the problem. If you run it, if you try to pass it deep, then you got to establish the run. And early on, the Falcons do what we do, which is try to stack the box with their defensive line, and they try to force it so that they can kind of dictate. And that's why it's a game of matchups. So if the Lions don't run the ball, then it puts the Lions in predicaments where they're in predictable passing downs, which makes it so much easier for the defense. You want to establish kind of that, and everybody knows you want to establish some level of unpredictability based on your running attack, which opens up the run action. So what stunk was early on, Jahmyr Gibbs didn't hit the holes the way he was supposed to, and the offensive line, there was like a wall. It was like every time Jahmyr touched the ball, Jahmyr's going to get hit, and he's going to go down. And it was like 2 yards, and there was nothing there. So that makes it so much tougher when you're not able to run the ball effectively. I think it's going to get better. I think the matchup against the Packers will help out a lot. A lot of people are expecting the Lions to grind it out, but give the Lions credit. They were able to withstand the pressure, and they grinded it out. They kept it going, and the opportunity now to see Sam Laporta and his emergence, you have to adapt. And here's the thing, which is great, is that I think the Lions, you can tell within the game, like, wait a minute, Ritter is a little bit impacted here. He's not really doing a lot in regards to showing that he's going to launch it deep or really just he ran the offense that was basically going to help them kind of chip away at the Lions defense. So the Lions pinned their ears back and were like, let's go. This is a guy we can get to. This is a situation where we can dominate, and that's what they did. So I think that, and look, it's almost like they disrespected the Falcons because they're like, oh, it's fourth down. We don't really have to go for it. Let's just punt it. And Dan Campbell, while he said this week he was upset he wasn't so aggressive, the game plan dictated that, look, our defense is playing pretty good. We probably don't even need to go for it on fourth down. And that's the way the game shook out. The offense needs Jameson Williams back. That's what they need. Or maybe they need a player that needs to be rescued out of a shitty situation. Did you hear Cuz on Wednesday? And it's fun because I think supporters, even though the likelihood is very, very low, Brad Holmes doesn't like 31-year-old receivers, but it's so fun to debate because people still will. A 31-year-old receiver that next year is going to command $30 million against the cap could be available for trade in Davante Adams. I would say this. Here's the tough part. The other team that's on the list that could potentially be interested, besides the Lions, which I don't think the interest is all that strong, is the Packers. And you don't want him going to the Packers. You're like, oh, shit. You know, he could go back there, or the Vikings or the Bears. He's not going to go to the Bears because they're a dumpster fire. But I just don't think that you want the 26-year-old version of Davante Adams, and you don't want the 31-year-old version who's going to, because his contract is disgustingly gross. He needs to give up some money. It goes from like $20 million this year to like 30 and to 40 and to 45 in the back end. So it's prohibitive. It's terrible. Our great writer Christian Bucher did a pros and cons. A lot of good pros. It would be another weapon, but a lot of cons in regards to the contract and his age. And I just think that in the end, here's what you need to do. You need to weather the storm, develop continuously Reynolds and Khalif. You need to get Jahmyr Gibbs up to speed on hitting the hole and developing, and you need to get healthy. And what will really help this offense, it'll look tremendously better when Jamison Williams, even if he's a decoy, to run the go route to open up everything because it's clogged up. And I think that's where the issue is. But against the Falcons, it's not that prohibitive. Moving forward against the Packers, it might be. You do need a little bit more offensively, and I think they will because, look, and I hate to say it because I know I don't want to patronize anybody, but because the first quarter of the season, when you look at football, it's not that high quality. I mean, you very rarely see a 70-point performance. You see these teams, they're all kind of easing their way into the season, and the quality of play is not up to par in the first quarter because everybody's kind of catching their legs under them. So that's what you see. You see grinded out 20-6 games. You see games where one side looks completely lost. You're not seeing the exact high quality. You will. After the Lions get their break, you're going to see a better and better version of this team starting with the game against the Panthers at home. But for this week, I think it's just about surviving because it's just shitty timing to play the Packers on Thursday tonight. But I do think what's your level of confidence in the offense taking a step forward?
Look, I'm not very impressed with what I've seen from Green Bay. So I think this is the right opponent at the right time. I think Detroit can take care of Green Bay. I think this is going to be a very interesting game because a lot of what you said, you hit the nail right on the head. You know, the issue with the offense is they don't really have a deep threat, so it's a lot of stuff underneath. When they are able to get it deep, there's either some overthrows or there's some miscommunication downfield, so you're not really able to execute that. As a team, they're throwing it deep, like really deep, like over 20 yards. I don't know, maybe 2-3 times a game. So if you're a defense, you can just kind of pin your ears back and just try to put pressure on the quarterback. And when you're dealing with a banged up offensive line, it makes things a little bit more complicated. It makes things a little bit harder. I think really right now with this team, we had one game where this offensive line was intact. You're kind of shuffling guys in. And I think the offensive line is a little bit more of a problem than having that deep threat. But I think that deep threat really does kind of help open things up. And it forces defenses to be a little bit more honest with you. They can't, like I say, pin their ears back and just put pressure on the quarterback. They can't stack the box. Those things kind of help open up the run game, which then helps allow your running back a little bit of reprieve and allows your quarterback a little bit of a reprieve and allows your quarterback to be able to manufacture different things, whether it's kind of going through different reads and progressions, calling different audibles at the line, getting guys in different situations where it can open up different plays. At this point, it does kind of feel like the Lions offense is playing a little bit with one hand tied behind its back, right? And it's twofold. It's because, like you said, you don't have the deep threat, and you've got a shuffling of offensive linemen. I think in Sunday's game, I think we've seen probably 4, maybe 5 variations of offensive line configurations just because guys weren't in there, and then guys were getting hurt, and then you had to start moving people around to try to compensate for the guys that you do have. So it's really trying to make the best out of a bad bunch there. I think the conversation of Davante Adams is incredibly interesting. I think at this level, right, he is 31, and generally you want a receiver on the other side of 30, but this guy is still operating at such a high level. Man. Like, he is still a Pro Bowl player. But the problem is when you get into 32, 33, and 34, that contract balloons, and it balloons hard. It goes from a little over $6 million to just under $17 million to over $35.5 million, and it stays there for the remainder of his contract until he becomes an unrestricted free agent in 2027. So to take that on, that's a lot of cap space. And you're probably looking at re-signing Jared Goff, especially right now. Jared Goff's playing pretty well. I know he's had a couple of interceptions early this season, but for the most part, Jared Goff's playing incredibly well, has a very good understanding of this offense, and has a lot of rapport with his wide receivers and his running backs. So it's trying to get everything to kind of synchronize. I kind of feel like this is that early part of last season, right, where the team started off really, really bad. And just like the offense was putting up points, but it wasn't as efficient as it became at the end of the year. I think at this moment in time, the offense is trying to figure some things out, and it's just going through some growing pains. And a lot of that has to do with the influx that's going on with the players who are playing the offensive line. You're dealing with injuries in your running back position. So now Jahmyr Gibbs has to do things that he's not necessarily comfortable or he's not necessarily adapt at doing when he's got to run between the tackles. Like, that's not his game. He's a guy who's got to get to the edge and get outside. He will run through the tackles, and he can do it. But honestly, he's more lethal if he's out on the edge or if he's being used as in a bubble screen or in the pass game. And then when you get your full complement of wide receivers back, then you can kind of see what they're going to look like and what this offense will really look like. I think it'll make things a little bit better. I think the offense will work a little bit smoother. I think things will kind of even out. But right now, it just kind of feels like they're doing a good job and they're doing a good enough job, but it really feels like you could be putting teams away much sooner. And if the defense has a bit of a letdown, the offense should be able to pick them up and put a team out of its misery. But instead, teams are lingering, and that's kind of what you've seen in that Seattle game. Teams just kind of lingered, and next thing you know, you go to overtime, you lose that game. In the game against Atlanta, game should have been over at the half. Instead, Atlanta's kind of lingering around, and by the fourth quarter, Aiden Hutchinson's able to put the game away, and everything's out of reach for the Falcons. I think going into Green Bay on a short week, you've got a young quarterback in Love. I think this team is in a very good position to win this game. I think this team, coming off of this win and kind of getting that hunger back, right? They kind of felt like watching that Seattle game, they just rested on their laurels a little bit, man. It really felt like everybody could have been operating at such a higher level, and they just weren't. They just kind of got in their own way. In the game against Atlanta, yeah, the offense kind of stuck in second gear, but they just kind of kept chipping away, and eventually things broke their way. They just kind of kept grinding it out. Whereas the defense was punching dudes in the mouth, and the defense was playing at an incredibly high level. I think carrying this over into this next game, defense continues to punch Green Bay in the mouth and make life really difficult for Love, makes life really difficult for the running backs and for the wide receivers. I think the offense can kind of take a little bit of solace in what they were able to do against Atlanta, right? Be like, yeah, it kind of sucked that we're not as efficient as we should be. But you know what? If we just kind of keep plugging away at it and we just kind of keep chipping away at it and we clean up some of these little mistakes that we're having, we should be able to put more points on the board. And I think that will all kind of come to fruition. On top of it, Green Bay coming off a short week as well. So they've got to deal with the same things that you have to deal with. I think what you've seen in that game from a coaching staff, and you kind of glossed over it a little bit ago, we got to give Dan Campbell credit. Because Dan Campbell did not go out of his way to play aggressive. Dan Campbell took what the book said and did that. The defense was playing well. There's no reason for you to gamble. There's no reason for you to try to do something crazy. There's no reason for you to try to go for it on a 4th and 2 or 4th and 1 or 4th and 4. There's no reason for you to get out near midfield and decide to run some silly play and turn the ball over. Instead, Dan Campbell took what was presented to him, and I thought he coached a very good game. I thought he did a great job this week. One, staying out of his own way, but two, kind of following what the book says to do. You got one of the best punters in the league. The guy is not just a threat with different fakes and throwing the football, but the guy has a lethal weapon for a leg. And you just need to let Fox do what Fox has to do. Put him out there and let him pin him deep, and then let your defense go out there and just cause havoc. I think you've seen a little bit of growth from the coaching staff this week, and I think it all plays well for what they're going to do when they head to Lambeau, again, on a short week, and they're just going to continue to build. And look, they talk about it all the time. They break the season up into quarters, and this is the first quarter. If I told you the Lions were going to be 3-1 after the first quarter, you would have took it. I think after the end of the first quarter, Lions are going to be 3-1. And we're going to be heading into that second quarter of the season, and it's all there for this team. It's all there for the taking. You're going to get healthier as the season goes along, and this team's going to get better. So I'm very high on the Detroit Lions right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for this game. Thursday in front of the entire nation. Again, the opportunity presents itself for the Lions to succeed on primetime. It's going to be great. Another opportunity for Dan Campbell's squad. And you recognize that what Dan Campbell's been able to do has been to rally this football team and to get them to perform at a high level when everybody thinks that potentially they're not going to play well. Look, it's short rest. The Packers got to deal with it as well. Here's what I want to see. I want to see Jahmyr Gibbs do a Lambeau leap. I want to see Jared Goff rebound, get into the end zone again, and do his thing and celebrate with the offense. Look, I'm on Ross St. Brown. I think is going to be a key factor. And again, that defense, man, it stinks that potentially Kirby Joseph might not be there or might not be 100%. But I think that the physicality is going to be great. I love this gritty, nasty defense that, quite frankly, is going to make Jordan Love's life quite miserable. I think that Jordan Love is going to get the Desmond Ridder treatment and bring on another 5 sacks. I think that that's the game plan. Pin your ears back and go after the Green Bay Packers. That's what you do. You go in, you go to Lambeau Field, and you make it your house. Again, 4 straight, potentially. If you win this game, you'll have won 4 straight against the Green Bay Packers. And that's what you got to do. That's why I'm predicting, letting everybody know now. It's a Lions victory, and they're going to handle business, and they're going to do their thing in Lambeau Field. And I think that that's going to be great. Hopefully the Lions fans travel well again, and we get a chance to hear the Lions fans cheer "Let's Go Lions" on primetime, baby, and that's what's going to happen. So it's going to be a great opportunity to see the Detroit Lions do their thing and handle their business, and that's what this football team needs to do, is to continue to go out there and earn their stripes. So it's going to be a good opportunity, man. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for this football team to showcase what they're about. Any concern at all with Goff, back-to-back games with interceptions? Look, he can overcome it in a game like that when you think that the Falcons are not going to come back. But moving forward, the biggest question probably we didn't put on the rundown, but we got to talk about it. My man Goff was getting his ass handed to him. That offensive line kind of let him down, and he was taking a beating. And you're like, shit. Hopefully you get Taylor Decker back to help out. Montgomery coming back will be of quite, hopefully, will be a returning player that can bring the swagger, maybe take a little bit of pressure off of, Jahmyr Gibbs. But, we'll talk about Gibbs and Swift, and we'll put it on the rundown next week because Swift is looking good, number 1 running back, and Jalen Carter's looking good alongside the defensive line there. Jordan Davis could have had all 3. So we'll save that kind of critiquing for a little bit later. We won't burst everybody's bubble because it's coming. It's starting. You're seeing it online. Every week that Swift dominates, you're like, whoa. But the offensive line owes Jared Goff one because, man, he took a beating and he was getting rocked quite a bit against the Atlanta Falcons. Cause for concern? Or you say, look, injuries made it so that Goff was going to be running for his life?
I think it has a lot to do with what's in front of him, right? I think the offensive line being beat up, and I think the offensive line kind of having to shuffle that deck and shuffle it on the fly makes it tough for him. I think it is concerning to see a guy who basically played flawless football through the last 10 games of the season last year have games where he's throwing back-to-back interceptions, and they're not great interceptions, right? Like the pass that he meant to throw to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he totally overthrew him by almost 3 yards and threw it right to the defender. That's not necessarily what you want to see. That's a bad read. I think the pick 6 was pretty bad as well. So yeah, a little concern there, but I think these are all things that Jared Goff can clean up, and I think in the end it'll be better for this team. I think getting Taylor Decker back helps. I think figuring out everybody's role and everybody's position on this offensive line, I think it's going to help solidify what this team can do and what this team will do going forward. So I'm not necessarily worried. I think there is a little bit of cause for concern. I think he cleans a lot of stuff up in this game, and I think next week when we're talking about this, we're in a much better place and we're much happier. I
love it. All right, good stuff. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Make sure that everybody knows that Detroit Sports Podcast is the place to listen to your favorite audio content in the world of Detroit sports. Really interesting stuff. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you agree or disagree with anything that at all that's been said, hit us up on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. Love the banter. Everybody that has been interacting and everything like that has been really solid over the course of the past 10 years. Cause podcasting time is over. Let's hope the Lions get an opportunity to win this game. And for me, I got to hope that I stay awake, man. It's tough, man. Those 8 o'clock to 8:15 starts are going to be super tough. So let's hope the Detroit Lions handle their business. 3-1. That's the goal. And we'll be back next week on Doc and Jock to recap it all for everybody here that supports the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.